All right, we're now at Universals of Language, Part 3, final part of our linguistics section. And here we're going to be exploring how linguistics plays a part in developing literacy primers. First thing we need to realize is that languages are first and foremost oral. And so before you start worrying about literacy or learning to read, first the language has to be put into some kind of a writing system. And so your linguist is identifying those sounds and putting them together and then creating the writing system that will go along with that language. So the phoneme goes to a grapheme or a written form, the sound goes to a written symbol. Um, so the phonetic alphabet chart, as we talked about earlier, helps the linguists to talk to each other about what sounds are in a language, but these aren't very good for literacy. As you can see, there's so many different forms and sounds that it's quite different to teach people to read and write with using those. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what written um, forms of writing languages down there are. There's only several that are available. Some languages have a one-to-one correlation of sound to symbol, and most often the newer um, the languages that have been more recently put into uh, a written form have a better one-to-one correlation. Then other languages have a mixture. English is one of those, and some of the other older languages have a real combination of things. So, for example, English, one grapheme may have multiple sounds. So we have a, the and pat, ah and father. They're all different sounds, but they use the same symbol to designate those sounds. Also, one sound may have multiple ways of writing it. So for English, the ah sound has AW and AU, saw, because. So this causes some difficulties for literacy and when you're introducing sounds for reading that you have to introduce these multiple ways of doing things. So for a lot of the languages we're working in where the it's been more recent putting the language into a written form, there's a better one-to-one correlation. There's also different writing systems. So we have alphabets, and this is a set of symbols used to represent the basic sounds of a language. So we have our Roman alphabet, which most of us are familiar with. Korean also is an alphabet, and then Cyrillic is another alphabet. So alphabets are the most LEI method predominantly works in languages where the writing system is alphabetic, although we do work in languages that where the alphabet is syllabary, um, where the language is written in a syllabary type of script. The two main ones are those is like Devanagari script, which Hindi and a lot of other languages in India use the Devanagari script, although there are other written writing forms in Indian languages. But here the symbol is inherently a syllable. So this symbol is pronounced ka when it's just by itself. If you add it to other things, it can become just the K. But by itself, it is a syllable ka. And then ka, ga, ga, na, sa, cha. So each one of these, and then the vowel by itself, like the A vowel by itself, has a whole separate symbol. Same with Arabic. The Arabic symbol here is the way it's the letter, kind of the R sound, depending on how it's in the syllable. By itself, it is the syllable ra. The A is inherent um, in that writing form. We also have pictographic or ideographic writing systems. Chinese is one sample of that, where this symbol represents dog, and it doesn't have a particular sound correlation because this writing um, it goes across several languages, for sure Cantonese and Mandarin in China. So you can use the same symbol and it'll be pronounced differently depending on which language is pronouncing it. But it means dog. So sociolinguistics is important when you're looking at relationship between language and society. And so this often comes into play in primer construction or when we're doing literacy primers, because if you have dialects that are very similar to each other, but there is a distinction there. Sometimes you can put the one primer for both of those dialects, and other times the people say, no, no, our language is more enough different that we want to have separate primers for that. And that happened in the case of in Ghana with the Akan language group. There's a number of different dialects within that group. So the Bible Society said rather than having three different language translations, let's do one updated translation that will encompass all of those language groups. And then as a result of that, they wanted one literacy primer that would go with that group. So we worked with different members of those dialect groups to put in the um, one literacy primer, the Akan literacy primer. But in the end, that all fell through because the different language groups that were in that said, no, our languages are unique enough that we want to have separate um, Bibles and separate literacy primers. So those have all been redone now. But that's a case where linguistically the languages are similar enough we could have one, but sociolinguistically it didn't work out. And pragmatics is concerned with the use of language in social contexts and the ways in which people produce and comprehend meanings. So this is where having your language speakers doing the writing of the stories and all of those pragmatics get worked out, in that they know the language, they know the culture, and they're going to write things that are appropriate for their people. So considerations for the primers: what symbols are used to make the words, what writing system are we using, and how is that going to shape how we break down our boxes, and how we introduce letters and or symbols to the literacy primer. How words are broken down into syllables within the literacy lessons. We'll be talking about that a lot. The natural discourse, the story, as we were just talking about with the language, um, native language speakers, that they're going to write natural story and how that comes together for appropriate culture and ways of doing story. So you need a good team to work between the language experts, the native speakers, and those who know the language, and the primer method experts, those who are trained LEI consultants. So those are all things that are going together in how we put together the primers. So in your for your assignment in the um, question area, comments area, so just kind of talk up a little bit about languages, while languages are distinct, what are some of the building blocks that are common to all languages, and just how those work together to form a story, and how that works together to why that's important for as we're developing the primers.